Spartans. It soon became apparent, though, that the home team was not in for a good day. Michigan State was just running up and down the field, and the score was quickly becoming lopsided. But you wouldn't know it, though, if you were there listening to the home team. It seemed the worse things got in the field for the Badgers, the louder the crowd became. Every now and then there would be outbursts of joy, high fives, hooping and hollering, people beginning to shout. See, it turns out that 70 miles down the road, the Milwaukee Brewers were beating the St. Louis Cardinals in Game 3 of the 1982 World Series. So the home team was not enjoying what was going on the field, but every now and then the scoreboard would flash the baseball game going on just a few miles down the road, and everybody would get excited. You know, life is kind of like that sometimes. You ever feel like you're losing in life? You ever feel like nothing is going your way? You ever feel like the other side gets the upper hand? They're running up and down the field, running up the score on us, and what do we have to celebrate sometimes? You ever feel like that? Well, you know, we still do have plenty of reason to celebrate. We have plenty of reason to high-five one another. We have plenty of reason to shout with joy, because I believe this, church. I believe that soon and very soon Jesus Christ is going to return for us. I believe He's going to come back with a shout. I believe the angels right now are warming up their lips, getting ready to blow that trumpet. People like to ask me, hey, when do you think the rapture is going to be? And what they mean by that is, are you pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib? I say, I think it's going to be in about 10 minutes. That's what I think. I think Jesus Christ is coming back any minute. Am I the only one here this morning? We are waiting on His return, and even though sometimes it may look like the world is winning, it may look like Satan has the upper hand, I believe that Jesus Christ is coming back for us. I believe that in any moment, in the twinkling of an eye, the dead in Christ will rise. But we, who may well be alive and remain when that happens, we will be caught up together to be with the Lord, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. I want to talk to you today about this topic, when Christ shall come. I believe He's going to come back very soon. But you know, this is not a new topic. This is not something where, in order to find out about it, we have to dig through the Bible and maybe find a verse here or there. The Bible has a lot to say about the return of Christ. In fact, one scholar has estimated that there are 1,845 references to the second coming of Jesus just in the Old Testament. It's also been factored that out of 260 chapters in the New Testament, there are 318 references to the second coming of Jesus. That's an amazing 1 out of every 30 verses in the New Testament is about Jesus coming back for us. 23 of the New Testament's 27 books deal with the topic. For every prophecy in the Bible concerning Christ's first coming, there are 8 which look forward to His second coming. He wanted us to know about this. Jesus wanted us to know. He told the disciples, if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. He's coming back for us. So this morning, let's talk about this topic, when Christ shall come. I think you all agree with me that He is coming back. There's some that deny the return of Christ, but that's not our church. We believe that He's coming back. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 24, and we're going to begin today in a text that is oftentimes referred to as the Olivet Discourse, because Jesus goes up into the Mount of Olives, and there He begins to teach His disciples about His return. This was not for the Pharisees. We talked last week about how Jesus did not have anything else to say to the Pharisees after the woes He pronounced on them last week. He says, you will not hear me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. He takes His disciples away from everyone else, and He gives them some information about His return. The disciples say, Lord, would you give us a sign about your coming? And so Jesus does just that. If you take notes today, let's begin by looking at the signs that Jesus gives about His return. Matthew chapter 24, let's begin in verse 4. After they've asked for a sign, Jesus answered it to them, and He said, see that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake.
And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures till the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then, Jesus said, the end will come. This is a difficult passage because we don't really know if he's talking about the rapture or the second coming. I don't know if you've ever read through Matthew 24 and 25, and we went through the parables earlier before we started going through the rest of Matthew, and we got into chapter 25, the parable of the 10 virgins, those wedding attendants, and we talked about that. Is this the rapture, or is this the second coming? Is this when we go up, or is this when Jesus comes down? And there's great debate about that, and you might interview 10, 20, 50 different pastors, and they might divide neatly into two groups on this. Or there might be some that just say, I don't know. And so it gets kind of difficult. We don't know if he's specifically referring to the rapture or the second coming. The reason is the disciples said, give us a sign about your coming. But they didn't even know he was leaving. So it's kind of an interesting question, right? They didn't know that Jesus was going to leave them. They thought he had come to fulfill all those Old Testament prophecies about the coming Christ now. And they didn't expect Jesus to go away. Their question about, give us the signs about your coming, their coming was a prophetic reference all through the Old Testament, meaning, in other words, when are you going to start ruling, Jesus? When are you going to start reigning? We've read all these prophets, and they said that you're going to come and you're going to rule and you're going to judge and everyone's going to worship you. But all you're doing is turning the other cheek, and all you're doing is teaching, and all you're doing is scolding. But when are you going to start acting like the Messiah? That's what they're asking. When are you going to come and be the one that all the prophets told us you were going to be? What is the sign of your coming? So Jesus gives them these signs, but they didn't know that he was leaving. We now understand that 40 days after his resurrection, Jesus ascended back into heaven with the promise that I am coming again. So now we take these signs about his coming and we apply them to his second coming, his return to earth. Whether this is specifically about the rapture or the second coming, it really doesn't make that big of a difference because we're talking about really one event in two phases. Do you believe Jesus is coming back to earth? Do you believe he's going to return? Do you? Well, good. So, we talk about the return of Christ as the rapture. We talk about the return of Christ as the second coming. We can talk about the return of Christ as this broad term that encompasses all 7 years from rapture to second coming. In the rapture, Jesus does not step down on the earth. We go up and meet the Lord in the air. At his second coming, he comes all the way down, and we will come back with him. So these signs could be about the second coming. I believe what Jesus does here is he begins with the signs before the rapture, then the rapture, and he walks us all the way through to the second coming. I think it's all tied up here in these verses. So let's talk about the signs that Jesus says that you and I should be on the lookout for. Because let's be honest, these disciples didn't make it till this point, but maybe you and I will. So what signs should we be looking out for? We love to talk about wars and weather, but Jesus first begins by talking about an apostasy, deception, falling away. You know, that's what the word apostasy means. That people, though, you may sit in the pews of the church still, physically people may be here, but mentally a lot of people are going to be gone. We have this pandemic and a lot of our churches are closed. I was reading a survey from the Southern Baptist Convention. They believe that when this is all over, if we return to normal, whatever normal is, they say 1 out of 5 churches will not open its doors back up after the pandemic. Now, maybe they'll open back up and a few people will come, but they're predicting churches to close. 1 out of 5 churches may never come back after this pandemic. We're meeting in here in person today, and I don't mean anything against people that are not meeting in person. Everybody has to do what they decide is best. But you know, across this country, there's churches that have not met together since March. And they're thinking that when this is all over, they're going to say, okay, we're open now, and everybody's going to come right back. It may not happen. I hope so. I pray that it does. And I believe that God's church will come when they're able to do so. I believe the bride will want to be here. I believe that people will come when they're given the opportunity. But a lot of those people that were never really saved to start with, those lukewarm people, maybe the ones that we were working on and, oh, good, they're finally coming and we're hoping they get saved, they might not come back. And so we might really have our work cut out for us once this is over. I believe right now people want to hear the truth. I believe right now people are so sick of what they see on TV that people are wanting to hear the truth. And that's why I wanted us to be open to give people the opportunity to hear the gospel now, because they might be curious and that window may close. And I want people to hear the gospel. But across this country, apart from the pandemic, weren't we already seeing a falling away from the truth before the pandemic set in? Because again, the Southern Baptist Convention will be the first to tell you, they put out their statistics every year. We baptized fewer this year than last year, and that was fewer than the year before, and fewer than the year before. This many buildings have closed down and gone up for sale. This many churches have dissolved. We're having fewer and fewer people in Sunday school, fewer and fewer people on Sunday mornings. And they give us these numbers year after year, and it gets depressing. But what we're seeing is this nation that says we are one nation under God, but we're nowhere to be found on Sundays. And then even when people do show up at church on a lot of Sundays, they're still not really having church. They're not really worshiping. You know what a lot of people do on Sundays? They walk in the door, they sit down right here, and they tell the professionals, entertain me now. We want to hear good music, we want to hear good singing, we want to hear good stories, a good message, and go on our way. But church is not a spectator sport. It's not the kind of thing like you're going to the movie theater. You don't come in and sit down and be entertained and walk out. It's interactive. We're all supposed to do something. We're all supposed to sing. We're all supposed to raise our voices. We're all supposed to take a shift, work in, whether it's the nursery or children's church or, doing different things, teaching classes, giving our money. We're all supposed to be involved in this. But people have checked out of this a long time ago. They say, well, I was there. I came in, sat down. It was a good show today. I enjoyed it, and we left, and that's that. That's not what church is supposed to be. But as we've embraced this new professionalism in church, where the people we pay to do church do it for us, and we go, it's no wonder that people are falling away. That when a tragedy comes in your life, you've walked away from God, but in reality, people have walked away from Him years ago. They're a warm body on a nice pew, but mentally they've already been gone. I believe it starts in the pulpits. It's getting harder and harder to find a pastor that'll stand up and preach the gospel. We're not preaching the word anymore. We're so worried about people's feelings and making people feel good. We're trying to give people a nice little talk, and that way they'll keep coming back, and I can smile, and you can smile, and everybody gets to leave happy. But that's not what preaching the gospel is. When I listen to more and more of these preachers, especially in these mega churches, you know what I hear? I just hear how awesome everybody is. And it makes me wonder, what's the point of Jesus? What's the point of the cross? What do we need a Savior for if we're all so good? If we're all so lovely? Look, I don't want to burst anybody's bubbles here, but you do know that you're dirty, rotten sinners, right? I mean, that's the gospel, isn't it? We're totally depraved, born separated from God, worlds apart, and on our best day, we have no hope of earning a spot in heaven. But the gospel says that God loved us so much that in spite of our sin, when we were unlovable, dead in our sins and trespasses, that God, who's rich in mercy, reached down to us, and He pulls us up to be seated with Him in heavenly places. That is the gospel that we preach. But this man-centered stuff that makes people feel good, it doesn't change hearts or lives. We can build big crowds. We can build buildings to hold more people by telling people how awesome they are. They love that message. But there's enough cults that'll tell people that. Let the church give people the truth. But we are seeing a falling away because people have decided that they would rather find someone who tickles their itching ears. And that's what Paul said would happen in the last days. Aren't we seeing that in America? It's been too long since we've had a great awakening. It's been too long since we've had a revival. And I beg God that there would be one, and I beg Him that it starts right here at Putman Baptist Church. I would love to see another revival, but if we don't, this may be one of the signs that Jesus told us to look out for. Watch out, He says. You'll be misled if you're not careful. As James says, people are carried away by every wind of doctrine. If you don't know what you stand for, then you'll fall for anything. If you don't know what this book says, you'll believe what anybody tells you it says. And that's why you've got to be in it yourself. That's why our Sunday school teachers, our children's church workers, that's why we make sure we teach the gospel so that we know what we believe. Jesus says if you're not careful, you'll be misled, and many will be. And that's what I see when I look around the United States of America. I know this is for the whole world, not just America, but this is where we live, and this is what we observe. Next, he says there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. Well, that's nothing new. We've had those since Cain killed Abel. There's been wars and rumors of wars. Wars that are both real and that are discussed and talked about. But then he mentions things like the weather. He mentions earthquakes. He mentions pestilence. You know, I don't know how much you pay attention to the weather. I don't know how much you might be watching the news over the last few months. Maybe you've been so sick of it you've turned it off, but anybody that walks outside can just remember what we've experienced over the last few months. We have had record highs, record lows, Egyptian sandstorms, and murder hornets during a global pandemic. Have you noticed all this? He mentions pestilence, and we have Egyptian sandstorms. That's like one of the plagues right out of Exodus. And it's no coincidence it started in Egypt, right? I mean, that's where the plagues were, and these sandstorms have made its way here, all while we've been shut down in a pandemic. You know, we had the wettest May on record, we had the hottest June on record, and in the middle of the hottest June on record, had the coldest single day in June on record. June 5th, I turned our fireplace on. Anybody remember that? It was in the 50s in June during the hottest June on record. I look around and say, what is going on out there? It's crazy. Not only that, but remember just a few Sundays ago we had an earthquake? Remember that? That was fun, wasn't it? No one knew what was going on. Oh, just an earthquake in South Carolina. Not California, South Carolina. I talked to my sister. She said, we've had 2 tornadoes touch down in Orlando. One outside where she works, another just right one street over from where my brother lives in Orlando. So we have earthquakes that have moved to the East Coast. We have twin hurricanes for the first time ever in the Gulf of Mexico. And the tornadoes have left Tornado Alley and gone to the Sunshine State. What in the world is going on? Well, Jesus says, I'm giving you some signs, and when you see these things, it may just mean that I'm about to return. I'm not saying that this definitely means that he is. I'm not one of those people that's figured out the date of the rapture. But when we look at the signs that he told us to be on the lookout for, it certainly could seem like it. But what else does he say? The love of man will grow cold, and lawlessness will abound. Well, can we check that one off too? Have you watched the news again lately? And by the way, I have to give a legal disclaimer here. Anytime anyone mentions rioting and looting, you must, by law, say mostly peaceful protests, okay? So I'm going to say in the mostly peaceful protests, people are being murdered. Cities are being burned down. Businesses are being destroyed. They're throwing chairs through the window, walking out with shoes and TVs and anything they can get their hands on. Isn't this lawlessness abounding in our streets? Do you watch this and say, don't we still have police? Don't we have a National Guard? Don't we have the army? And I'm not getting into who has authority to sin what, where. I'm not getting into that. But haven't we typically had law and order in this country? Haven't we typically been able to say, well, if you burn down a building, you go to jail? I mean, hasn't that usually been how things have worked here? What is going on? Lawlessness truly abounds in this country. And people want to debate whose fault and why and what we do about it. And I just look at that and say, this just seems like what Jesus told us to look out for. But what does he say? The end is not yet. These are what he says, the birth pains, the beginning, the labor pains. So, if Jesus compares these things to a woman going into labor, then I think we can look around and say the wars, the weather, the lawlessness, the apostasy, these things are like the contractions of a woman about to deliver the baby. And I think creation itself may be going into labor as we speak and saying, what you're seeing right now, what you're feeling right now is the beginning of the process. I've never delivered a baby. I know that's very close-minded of me in 2020 to say that I can't deliver a baby. But look, I've never gone into labor or felt the pain of contractions. But from what I hear, ladies, they're pretty bad. Anybody agree with me on this? Am I right? Am I off base? I've heard they're terrible. But here's what I've always heard from every mother who's ever given birth. She says, the contractions were painful, the labor was awful, but when they handed me that baby, you know where I'm going with this? It was all worth it. Well, here's what I think. When we look at the TV, when we look at the news, when we watch these things and we get frustrated and we pull our hair out and we say, how can evil keep winning? When's God going to step in? Why is this stuff allowed? What can we do about it? I think these are like the pains of contractions, but I believe we're not going to be handed a baby. I believe, though, that we're going to be raptured soon and Jesus will embrace us and we're going to say, it was all worth it. The stuff that we went through while we were down there, yeah, it was uncomfortable, it was unpleasant, but it was worth it. That's what we had to endure to make it to this point. And Jesus is saying, these are the beginning. These are the signs that you are to look out for. He gives them these signs, but as we move forward in what Jesus had to say, we get down to verse 15. Jesus begins to talk to them about a time of sorrow. Look what he says in verse 15. He says, so when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, and then Matthew gives words that I don't think Jesus said, I think Matthew has added this, let the reader understand. Matthew's saying, this is difficult. All right, you're going to have to, what our teachers used to say, put your thinking caps on for this one. Jesus tells them, be on the lookout for the abomination of desolation. Well, aside from sounding really cool, what does that mean? What is the abomination of desolation? This would have been shocking to the disciples because they thought it had already happened, and Jesus is saying, no, that's still in the future. He says, guys, you're going to see the abomination of desolation. They're thinking, but that happened years ago. See, Daniel gave this prophecy where he spoke of what he called the abomination of desolation. He said that the temple itself was going to be destroyed and an abominable act is going to take place inside the temple. Well, when we come to that intertestamental period, Old Testament's over, New Testament hasn't begun yet, and somewhere right in the middle, this man named Antiochus Epiphanes, he brought his army to Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. That's the desolation. But what is the abomination? He did something that was unspeakable. If you know your history, you know that Antiochus Epiphanes brought a pig into the ruins of the altar, and he sacrificed a pig to Zeus on the altar to God. Aside from the fact that pigs were unclean animals that should not have been in the temple anyway, offering anything to Zeus would have been the height of blasphemy. So Antiochus, just to stick it to the Jews, he offers an unclean animal to a non-living god inside the temple, and everybody in Jerusalem thought, it's the abomination of desolation. What Daniel predicted has happened. But then years later, Jesus says, oh, you want another sign? What's about to happen? Next will be the abomination of desolation. They're thinking, wait, we thought that already happened. So then just a few years after Jesus says this, in the year AD 70, Titus marches in. And again, they rebuild the temple. Then Titus comes in and he destroys the temple. Another desolation. What's the abomination? Well, he raises the flag of Caesar over the temple ruins and told people, you will worship Caesar here in the ruins of this temple. And people did, and they said, this is the abomination of desolation. But it's still not it. That was in the year AD 70. There were no earthquakes in the year AD 70. The signs that Jesus mentioned didn't take place there. Jesus is speaking about the Antichrist, who when we get into the book of Revelation, we see that the Antichrist will now once again try to cause worldwide worship, and this will truly be the fulfillment of what Daniel said all those years ago. What Jesus says is still in the future for us. The abomination of desolation will take place. I don't plan on being around for it, so I'm not too worried about it. I don't know what your end times beliefs are, but we believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. What we mean by that is Jesus is going to take the church out of here, and then all these bad things that we call the Great Tribulation, those things will begin to happen. I believe 3.5 years after the rapture is when the Antichrist will come and will commit this act, the abomination of desolation. And then for the next 3.5 years, it'll be literally hell on earth. And I don't say that lightly, but that's what's going to happen if you read the book of Revelation. And Jesus says, this is letting you know that I'm about to come back. We've got the rapture. Then when you see this, you'll know that I'll be coming back very soon. And that's why we're going to close. We've seen the signs and the sorrow, but let's close by talking about the second coming when Jesus will physically come back to earth. We'll pick up in verse 29. And the verses I skipped, I encourage you to read those. But in verse 29, Jesus says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. If we take the material given to us in the book of Revelation and we add it to what Jesus is saying here, we get a more complete picture of what's going on. But all the armies of the world will be gathered together in the valley of Megiddo, what we refer to as Armageddon. And they'll be gearing up for this final battle where it's going to be the Antichrist and every evil, wicked, unbelieving person on one side and those who still believe in Jesus on the other. The Jews saved during the tribulation, anybody else saved during the tribulation, and it's not going to look like the odds are in the favor of the believers. Going to be greatly outnumbered. But right at the last second, when the battle is just about to ensue, then Jesus will finally come back. The first time he came, he rode upon a humble donkey. The next time he comes, he will come rushing in on a war horse. And we will be following Jesus. So again, not too worried about this battle. I'm not going to have to fire a shot or swing a sword. Jesus will take care of everything. We will simply follow him as he will route through and save the day one more time. Jesus is good at saving the day. He's good at coming in at just the right moment. But by our standards, he's never been punctual, has he? See, by our standards, we always want him to come a little bit sooner. We'd like for him to come a little bit earlier, and he's good at making us wait a few more minutes, isn't he? He made Moses wait until Pharaoh had him pinned before he parted the Red Sea. He waited until the fiery furnace was heated 7 times hotter than usual before he joined Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He waited until Daniel was in the lion's den to send the angels to shut the mouth of the lions. He waited until the disciples thought, we are going to die in this storm, before he said, peace be still. And here they will be waiting, thinking, we are toast in this valley of Megiddo, before he rushes in to save the day. Maybe you find yourself waiting on God right now. You need him to rush in and save the day. Save your marriage, save your finances, to help deliver you from addictions, to help deliver you from some sin, to come in and fix some problem, or a host of other maladies. You need God to come and rush in and save the day. Oh, he's not punctual by our standards. He makes us wait just a little bit longer than we'd like to, but he's never let us down. He's always right on time in his sovereign schedule. The more I live, the more I see it in my own life or in the life of others. When people stand up and testify and say, let me tell you what God has done, and that story always involves waiting, and waiting a little longer than we would have liked to have waited. But God is faithful. He's dependent. He's never let us down, and he never will. If you're waiting on God right now, I would tell you just keep waiting. Keep praying. Keep believing. Keep trusting, keep asking, keep acting, but don't give up on him. Understand that he's always come through and that he always will. If you're waiting on God today, you wait a few more minutes, because I believe he's soon going to rush in. You know, he gives this information to the disciples here, but as I said a minute ago, they didn't live to see this. He's telling them, oh guys, here's the signs. When you see these, I'm about to come back. Well, these disciples, they've all died and gone to heaven. Most of them. Sorry, Judas. But most of these guys, they didn't make it. You know, the 11 disciples, they didn't make it to the rapture. And we have loved ones who likewise have not made it to the rapture. These signs are for those who will make it to the end. That might be us, or it might be our great-great-great-great-grandkids. We still don't know. We continue to wait. But these signs were given to the disciples, but ultimately for those who need to hear them. And in that day when they need to hear them, they'll be right here. But you know what we still get from it? What the disciples got from it? What your great-great-grandparents who've passed on in the Lord, you know what they got from it? We get this instruction to watch and be ready. Because no one knows the day or the hour. We're given some signs, and these signs can help us. But we must always be ready. See, in the next few verses, he tells them, just consider the fig tree. You see the leaves changing on the fig tree, and you know what that means. And we do too, right? I look out the window in our backyard and we have these 2 walnut trees, and guess what's happening? I'm so excited. The leaves are turning yellow and they're falling. It's my favorite time of year. When we see leaves begin to turn red and orange, when we have to get out the rake and start raking them up, fall is coming. We know what the changing of the leaves means. Winter will be here soon, kids. Christmas will be here soon. I'm already looking forward to Christmas break, and we hadn't even started school yet. And we get excited about these things. We know what the leaves are telling us. And, 6 months or so from now, after everything's been dead, we'll look outside and we'll start to see some little buds on the trees. And we know what that means. The leaves tell us something is happening. Jesus says, you consider the fig tree, you see the leaves changing, and you know what's coming. He says, when you see these signs, let it be like the leaves that are turning orange and red and yellow. When you see these things happening, you know that something is about to happen. But of the exact day, the exact hour, no one knows. Not us, not the angels. Jesus says, not even me, not even the Son of Man. I believe he knows now. I believe that was part of being human. When he emptied himself, he voluntarily for a time gave up some knowledge that he had. Of course, Jesus knows now when he's going to come. But we don't know the day or the hour. I'll tell you this, when somebody puts out a book or somebody preaches a sermon and says he's going to come back on May 5th, 2021, I'll tell you what day he's not coming. May 5th, 2021. When we put out a day, it's like Jesus says, I'm not coming down that day. Because we will not know the day or the hour. We are not going to know exactly when he's going to come. He wants us to be ready, to be prepared. He goes on the next few verses and he says, look, if you know that a thief is going to break in tonight, you don't go to sleep. If you knew a thief was going to break into your house at midnight tonight, do you go to bed at 10:30 and hope for the best? Or do you stay on guard? If your boss comes to you tomorrow and says, I'm taking a lunch break, I'm going to be back at 1 o'clock, are you going to take a nap at 12:45? No, you're going to be working when your boss returns, right? You don't want your boss to come back and find you asleep. You don't want a thief to come in and find you asleep. You stand guard. You wait and you work while you watch. And that is what the church is supposed to be doing. I believe he's coming back very soon, but you know who else believed he was coming back very soon? Everybody in the history of the church. And so he might not come back in our lifetime. So here's what we do. We live every day like he's going to come back today. We talk about that midnight cry as if there's not multiple time zones, right? He's going to come back at midnight. It'll probably be midnight for somebody. But we talk about that midnight cry when Jesus comes back, and he may come at midnight. So let's be ready. But he may come sometime tomorrow. So let's be ready. He may come a year from now, so let's be ready. Let's not be caught napping. We don't want to fall asleep while we wait. I don't want him to come back and find me being lazy. I don't want him to come back and find that I've been unproductive. We've been warned. We've been given the signs. And if he comes back, we can't say, I didn't know you were coming. He's going to say, there's wars, there's famines, there's earthquakes, I gave you the signs. When he comes back, I want to know that I was doing all that I could, that I was sharing the gospel, that I was preaching the word, that I was inviting someone to church, that I was praying with the sick. I want to be able to say, I was doing everything I could with the time that we had. I've told you before, I see these church signs that say, Jesus is coming, look busy. And I can't think of anything worse than a church could put on their sign. Jesus is coming, look busy. I say Jesus is coming, get busy. Let's get busy with what time that we have and do the work that we know we're supposed to do. He may come back today, so let's live like it. He may come back down the road, and since we don't know the day or the hour, let us live every moment as if he could come back at any moment. Because if we were to make a timeline, that's the next thing we're waiting for. That rapture, that trumpet call, that return of Christ. And so let's live every moment like he could return at any moment. I'm going to ask if you'd please stand up where you are today with your heads bowed, your eyes closed. We're going to have the piano playing. But here's the thing. If you know that Jesus came today and he raptured the church, if you say, you know what? All those Christians would be gone, but I would still be here. I wouldn't want to keep living if I knew that, because he could come back at any moment. If you need to get right with God today, then we're going to give you the opportunity to do exactly that. If you think, maybe if the rapture's come, I don't know if I'd go. I hope I'd go, but I don't know for sure. Well, you have the opportunity to get that nailed down. Paul says these things were written unto you that you may know that you have eternal life, not hope. Maybe today as a Christian, you know you'd be taken in the rapture, but you haven't been very busy and you want to apologize. Say, Lord, help me to be busy. God, help me to be doing the work that I know I need to be doing. Maybe today there's someone you want to pray for. If the rapture was today, I'd be gone, but they'd still be here, and you want to lift up that person in prayer. Maybe there's something else God has laid in your heart for which you want to pray. This is your chance to do that now. The altar is open. If you want to come for salvation, if you want to come and say, I don't know if I'd be taking the rapture, maybe I'd stay here, come down here. We'd love to talk to you. God, I pray in these next few minutes, if your Holy Spirit is leading someone to step out and get something right before it's eternally too late, I pray that they would step out and do exactly that. And Lord, I pray for Christians that have things that maybe that are on their heart that they need to get right. God, I pray that they would. We thank you for your blessings, but Lord, I pray in these next few minutes something good would happen. Someone would get something right with you. God, let us be busy with the time that we have left. I ask this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.